Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Thriving Talk. This is another Dadson edition in which me, Tim, gets the chance to ask my dad, Tinku Thompson, questions. How are you doing today, Dad?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good actually. Not that great, but I'm having some throat cough issues. But I'm doing good. Otherwise, I'm doing good.
Okay. A quick reminder to all our listeners, Thriving Talk is available on major platforms like iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and more. So for today's topic, we are going to talk about temptation and how we get tempted. So for my first question, I want to ask, what is temptation, and does Bible say anything or has anything to say about it?
Absolutely. Bible has got a lot of things to say about temptation. Let me just start off with a verse again here. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verses 13 says, "The temptation in your life are no different from what others experience. And God is faithful. He will not allow the temptation to be more than you can stand. When you are tempted, He will show you a way out so that you can endure." Okay. Matthew 4:1, it says, "Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted there by the devil." So Jesus went through temptation. I hope you remember that passage where it talks about the temptation of Jesus.
Yeah.
In the Lord's Prayer, Matthew 6:13, it says, "And don't let us yield to temptation, but rescue us from the evil one." So there the prayer is that don't allow any temptation to come to us. No, that's not the prayer. It says that don't allow us to yield to temptation. So temptations can come, but the key is not to yield to the temptation. And then Matthew 26:41, Jesus actually says to His disciples, "Keep watch and pray, so that you will not give in to temptation." And says, "For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak." One more verse. James 1:12 says, "God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. Afterward they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love Him." So, temptation itself is not sin. Temptation itself is not something which we need to say that, oh, this is bad. But what is bad is the fact that if we yield or we give up to the temptation, then it becomes bad.
Okay, so where does temptation come from?
Okay, again we'll have to go back to the Bible. It says in James 1:40, "Temptation comes from our own evil desires, which entice us and drags us away." So it is that, there is something innate in us that makes us to go after tempting things, right? Okay. So if you look at the commercials, the ads, if you are watching some video or anything, there is a lot of commercials. And these commercials are not boring. They are made it in such a way that it makes you to desire to have that thing. Like the latest gadget or latest of something you have, even though you don't need it, what you have is working, but these ads are made in such a way that you are tempted to go for it. It comes to a point where a desire is generated deep within us that I want to have it, right? It moves you from your needs to wants. You want it. It's not needed, but you still want it. And there are other things where, temptation, where it's not actually good in long run. And a lot of times the temptations, if we yield to those temptations, it may not have consequences in the short term. It may give us some pleasure or some things in the short run, but in the long run, it is not going to be that good. And there are many reasons for that. And people are tempted by all sort of things. Sometimes it could be as simple as a candy, the food, dessert, clothes, shoes, games. Other times it could be very drastic, like drugs, alcohol, some addictions, lust, etc. Sometimes people go after these temptations because of enjoyment or pleasure and can look harmless, but the effects of the temptation can cause long-term trouble in our lives. I don't know how many times we hear about some things from some people's life which they did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 25 years ago, and it was hidden and kept secret for all those years, but now all of a sudden it comes up and people are all shocked to learn that, oh, such and such person who looked very nice and good is all of a sudden like this, right? So we may think, for example, like spending money on clothing is not bad. You get certain things, right? And then all of a sudden it becomes more frequent where you are almost spending what you don't have, and all those things, right? And the same thing is with other things true. One of the things I have come across is when we talk about drugs or alcohol or things like that, people all start with very small, right, moderate. They don't think it's harmful, but what happens is as time goes by, they become addicted to that. And so that is the reason why, and then we all know that when something becomes an addiction, it can have a lot of bad physical, mental, and social effects, which can happen in our lives. So this holds true for a lot of other things in our life too. So sometimes people fall into temptation more easily in a certain area than others, right? And sometimes some people, by nature, they like food, and they will fall into a lot of things. But some people don't have a problem in that area. But for some people it could be some other areas where so I have come across people who have this problem with shopping. They go and do a lot of shopping, but and then they realize they should not have bought all those stuff, and then they regret it. So I will tell you one more thing. Most of the time, after somebody yields to a temptation, gives it up, later they regret about it. Most of the time, that's what happens.
Okay.
So it is very important that coming back to your question of where does the temptation come from? It comes from deep within us, our desires, and then there are also external factors. There are a lot of external factors, where you will see that there is a world out there which has got a lot of things to tempt us, and which wants to have us in its grip. And if we are not careful, we will end up yielding. But remember what Jesus taught us to pray, that help us not to yield to temptation.
So temptation comes from the things we see and hear, right?
And sometimes it can be from deep inside of our heart too. See, here is a stimulating factor, but it could be some things, most of the time the origin is from seeing, we hear, and we think about something. So it could be like different sources.
So what steps can we take to avoid temptation?
Yeah, so first of all, I think, again, we need to have a conviction that yielding to temptation is not good, right? Whatever step we say, so a lot of times we can have all these steps, but if we are not convinced that yielding to temptation is wrong, we will not take any concrete steps. But once we have that, okay, this is a problem and I need to overcome this, then there are some practical steps we can take, right? So first thing is, we need to take into account what are our weaknesses, right? As I was telling earlier, we all have areas of weakness, and sometimes if we are failing repeatedly, it's good to write about it, and then we can see how we can handle it. We can avoid situations, and we can think about how should I, let's say there is a place or some gathering or some event or something where you feel like, you end up doing things you should not do. So the best way is not go there, right? And sometimes we think that, I will go there, but I will still not do it. But then you have lost the battle half by going there itself, right? So you won the battle if you can completely eliminate that scenario or situation in your life.
Okay.
Right? And so that's why it is very important that we first of all understand what is our weakness, right? And then the other thing we can do is we can talk to somebody who is older, and maybe a mentor or somebody. It could be a spiritual mentor, or it could be someone, right, to whom you can tell that I'm falling in this area, I'm having this weakness in my life, how can I overcome it? And they can keep you accountable, and they can help you and tell you certain things. They can give you a lot of wisdom, pray for you. And the other thing I would say is, do not put yourself into situations which are very conducive for temptation, right? A good example I will tell you, let's say we start watching some video,
Okay.
right? And then we just go and then we click the next one, we click the next one, we click the next one. Before we know, we started at 10 and it's already 1 o'clock. Right? So how can we avoid that thing is, let's say you are going to watch a video, you can be very mindful about the fact that, okay, you have to plan out your day, and you can be very mindful about the fact that, I'm not saying that every time watching a video for 3 hours is bad. There may be very genuine reasons. But let's say that's just a time wastage where you didn't get much, you wasted your time, then that's a problem in which you yielded to something which you really didn't want to do. A lot of times, after that 1 o'clock, you say, oh, half of my day is over, right? And you didn't intend to do that. So in those scenarios, what you can do is, you can make sure that after that one, you just stop it, or put some timer, put some alarm, or whatever is there. Like a lot of kids struggle with this whole video games issue, right? They keep playing for hours. Some people text for hours. Some kids text whole night. So what you could do is, you could put a something like distraction free, or put your phone on focus mode after 10 p.m. or whatever the time limit may be. Same thing with social media. Some people can be like browsing social media all the time, right? You can put some limits. And if you are somebody who finds yourself being tempted to look at your social media feed all day long, one thing you can do is remove the app from your phone. And, just look at it when you really need it.
But don't these situations start from temptation? But like how you're saying temptation, don't put yourself in situations that trigger temptation, but don't we come into these situations because of temptation?
Yeah, we come into this situation because of temptation, but majority of the time, temptation comes once you are there. Like the examples I told you, right? Let me elaborate on that since you asked that question. Let's say I have a problem of looking at social, Facebook or Instagram or something, like I would say 50 times a day, which is a time waster, which is not needed, right? But there are a lot of people who struggle with it. So now one of the easy solution to that is just uninstall it from your phone. Many people won't agree with that, but that's the only way. Because when you don't have it on your phone, it's not that convenient. You have to log in on your computer and look at it, which may be more difficult than just having it on your phone, right? Same way, there could be times where you put your phone on do not disturb mode when you're focusing on doing something. So there are things which if we keep things which distract us, take our time away and all those things. So temptation, as we were saying earlier, it can be very simple, small things which is wasting our time. It could be something which is destroying our life, right? So it depends on what the situation is, we will have to do it. And as you were asking about temptation takes us to places, yes, that is also absolutely correct. But then if you know that going to that place or that situation is going to make me do things which I should not be doing, in that case, you should avoid getting into that situation itself.
So if we are tempted, how do we resist it?
Yeah, so resisting, first of all, you should encourage yourself, knowing that no temptation has come into your life which is only for you, because as we read earlier, others also face very much similar temptations or temptation. Everybody faces it. Even Jesus showed us the example. And then what you need to do is when we fall or when something happens, we all get into a mode of condemnation, right? Where we feel like, okay, I failed, I wasted my time or whatever. But I think the best way to counter that is asking forgiveness from God and asking for His grace to move forward. So that's one thing. We need to encourage so that we do not fall into it again. But if that happens, we need to actually continue to seek God's help to overcome that. So the other thing I want to remember is, that have friends or people, mentors who will help you in this. But don't ask friends who themselves are fallen into these things, right? Because that may not be helpful. In some cases, that can be helpful because if two people are having similar challenges or struggles, in some cases it can be helpful, but not in all cases. So basically what you can do is you can check on each other and you can keep accountable you can do all those things. And as we discussed earlier, temptations comes in many different ways in our life, and we have two options. We can either fall into it or rise above it. Sometimes you may feel like you are alone in this battle and struggle, but other people also struggle. But the difference is some are overcomers who don't yield, and some fall into it. Sometimes some people may have encountered similar scenarios, and they might have overcome it, so they could share some of their own experiences as to how they overcame those situations in your life. And remember, God is always there for us to help us. It is not God's plan that we fail and we yield to temptations and fail every day. But God's plan and desire for us is that we should have a victorious, overcoming life. So God's help will always be there, but we have to do our part. We need to repent, and if it is a sinful scenario, we need to repent and ask forgiveness. And then I believe that we will be able to get through it.
So I've asked you about avoiding it and resisting it, but what do we do if we absolutely just fall into our temptation?
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to say. Let's say you fall into a temptation. Let's say, okay, so here is a good example. Let me try to see if this can make sense to you. Let's say in the morning you got up, you plan to study for 2 hours. Right, say, just think about it. But before that, you wanted to watch something related to science or something, right? But you are watching it, and as I said, you clicked. Then some NFL thing came up, you clicked on it. Then something came up, you clicked on it, and you wasted 3 hours, and then you freed. I'm giving a very simple example. Now you are absolutely feeling sorry that you fall into a temptation, which was watching all these things and did not do what you're supposed to do. In that scenario, what you can do is you can pray to God and for help. I don't think, unless you did something which was sinful, it was okay. But at the same time, what you can do is ask God's grace. And next time, when you have a similar scenario, you can study first and then watch the video, right?
Yeah.
Do the study first and then watch video. Then by the time your 3 hours may be over, and you will not be spending like 2 hours wasting your time. So a lot of times we will have to take some decisions which are preventive in nature. So the other thing, a lot of people struggle with these addictions, and they hide their monitor and everything, right? So a lot of times it's helpful if you are sitting in a place where anybody can watch your computer. That way, you know that somebody will see, so it may help you more. So sometimes you may have to take decisions which is inconvenience to us, but it will help us in the longer goal of winning over our battles. Many times people don't understand that, and people think that they are stronger, but and then they fail in that, and they get tempted and they fall into the trap. But we have to be careful.
So, what would you say are the main points about temptation? Or what are like the main things?
Yeah, so the main thing I would again say that the temptation in your life are no different from that others experience, and God is faithful. He will not allow temptation to be more than what you can stand, and when you are tempted, He will show you a way out so that you can endure. That's from 1 Corinthians chapter 10, 13. And then we have to pray that God, don't let me yield to temptation, but rescue me from the evil one. Right? And we have to patiently endure testing and temptation, because there is a reward waiting for us. So we need to really evaluate, write it down if we are failing in one area, and we need to have a strategy, because enemy may have strategies to make us fall, but we, with the help of God, can have good strategies to overcome it. And another thing is, if you find that there are particular times and places or things where you tend to fall, you can actually plan something else during that time. You can plan, some other activities or something, so that you are not giving that opportunity or foothold, right, as it says, right? You're not even allowing that to take place in our life. So temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drags us away. So we have to be very careful. Another thing, we have to be prayerful. We have to be trusting God. Otherwise, we cannot win this battle in this sinful world.
So thank you for sharing, and I hope our listeners have understood that temptation comes for everyone, and we have to try to avoid it and resist it by the help of God. So thank you for listening to all our viewers. In the coming weeks, we will be coming back with more Dadson editions of Thriving Talk, and I'll be asking more questions to my dad. As we said in the beginning, this episode is available on many different platforms. Do not forget to follow or subscribe to the Thriving Talk podcast on your favorite platform to receive new podcasts episodes as they get released. Also remember that my dad has a weekly newsletter in which he shares a lot of good information. The link to the newsletter is in the show notes. Make sure to subscribe to the newsletter. We'll be back, but until then, remember, Satan is always coming at us with temptation, and it is our job to avoid it.
Thank you.